So there's two things to go into in details, this law of karma, how it works, the details of it, the nuts and bolts of it. And the second thing to learn about is the contents of the mind, the way the mind works. So it's all in the literature, it's dealt with in it's vast, vast and deep, the literature on the mind. And there's the epistemological model of the mind, which is really fascinating, But remember, we're not discussing the physical brain here. We're discussing the actual way the mind, the cognitive process works. And two, this is coming from the internal observation of the great yogis, not from observing the brain or observing behaviour, observing the mind, observing the cognitive process itself at ever more subtle levels. And then there's the psychological model of the mind, which is the contents of the mind. The contents of the mind. So these are the two things let's discuss. And this is all the wisdom wing. And this is what informs our ability to help others. The compassion wing. So let's look at the mind then, go more deep into the mind. Well, there's an interesting little example I'll use to really show us, give us some insight into the way the mind works for the Buddha. So, for example, I might say to you, in fact I would say, oh, isn't that a pretty cup? I would say that. The yellow is very pleasing. Gold, the yellow is the main thing for me. So okay, I would say that's a pretty cup. So we naturally, without analysis, we would deduce that my eyes see a pretty cup. That pretty cup is the object of my eyes. Okay, we would say that without analysis. So of course, if we were a materialist scientist, we'd look into the eyes and what make them work, etc., 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 to look into that, and it's be very fascinating. Well, Buddha has the same approach, but he's not discussing the eyeball. He's discussing eye consciousness. So here, this is the point now. Buddha would say your eyeball doesn't cognize anything. The actual part of us that does the cognition is the consciousness. So that's sensory consciousness. Sensory consciousness. So for the Buddha, that means, again, of course, not physical. So the way to say it would be, it's that part of our mind that functions through the medium of the eyeball, the nerves and all the stuff, that cognizes something. I might hear one trumpet note, and I'll go, wow, Miles Davis, So I will naturally think that my ears are cognizing blissful Miles Davis. Well, okay, Buddha would say in both cases, no, you are wrong. First of all, the way Buddhism describes it in the epistemological model, sensory consciousness, again, that part of your mind, which is not physical, that functions through the medium of the ear, the drum, the bits and pieces, the nerves, the eye, the tactile, the five senses, in other words. That's part of your mind, remember, not physical. So, first point. Second point, eye consciousness, the senses for the Buddha are actually like dumb animals, with due respect to animals. They're profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition. And this is a huge point. When we really hear it, it really tells us a lot about Buddha's view about why we suffer. As Lama Yeshe says, we make the body the boss, For us, we know our experiences via our senses run our lives. We determine happiness and suffering in terms of sensory, pretty much. It's huge. We know there's more, but the sensory is the doorway to the universe, and it's the first level of our experience. And we know the millisecond there's an unpleasant sensory experience, we do everything to change it. It's huge for us. So as Lama says, we make the body the boss, and the Buddha's view is that's really inaccurate. Don't hear it as moralistic, just inaccurate. It's way more subtle and more nuanced than that. So what's happening? So the Buddha would say, the sensory consciousnesses are profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition. And eye consciousness, for example, can only cognize two things, shape and colour. It can't even label it yellow. It just cognizes what we call yellow. And it cognizes whatever we call that, It's really limited. That's all it can do. So then the obvious question is, what part of my mind is cognizing a pretty cup? And this is the point. So what's happening is this, for the Buddha. My eyes go here. And within a millisecond we know, I don't have to go, well some people might, a bit slow, you know. What is it? Yeah, maybe I like it. Not sure, let me think about it. You know, no, I might go, you know, and often I say, even if I'm wrong, I'm sure, you know. I'll say, yeah, I like it, it's a pretty cup. So what part of my mind is cognizing pretty cup? Well, I'll tell you what's happening. Quicker than Google, and that's a great analogy, but it's absolutely true, quicker than Google, instantaneously, in a millionth of a second, almost with no time, my mental consciousness is accessed. But Tibetan Buddhists point to here, when they say mental consciousness, to the heart, curiously. My mental consciousness is accessed. So this, we have to understand in the Buddha's view here, that basically the Buddha's view is two things. Like we said already, every millisecond what we think and do and say is programming our mind. And that's how we create karma, and we're going to go into that later. But another more fundamental function of mind, consciousness, this river of mental moments, is that every millisecond of whatever we experience, whether we process it, whether we're even aware of it or not, doesn't matter, it all gets stored in our mind as memories. And we're not talking the brain here, we're talking the cognitive process of our consciousness, according to the Buddha's view. Everything gets stored. Like, as Geshe Tashi in London said, it's like every second of the day we're shooting a movie, just all day, and then it's all stored away, and then future lives are like when we play those movies out, you know, dependent on the karma. So everything's stored away. So basically, even just in this life, the bit that I've stored away in my mind from my taste, I've developed, I remember it's yellow, I remember it's a cup, I know what I like, I've stored it all away, and it's all there in my mental consciousness, accessible to me. That's where the workshop is, as Lama Zopa says. So for the Buddha, this is what we have to learn to become familiar with. The senses of drag, you know, actually. And we give so much more power to them than they deserve. We misconceive what they think, what they see, which is why we get led up garden paths. So the mental consciousness is where a pretty cup comes from. And what is that? So basically for the Buddha, the mental consciousness, it consists billions of thoughts. There are countless thoughts, including our feelings. I'll go into that. But they basically come down to being opinions. Everything in our mental consciousness is an opinion. So Buddha would divide all these opinions. This sounds so peculiar to call them opinions. But they're essentially thoughts. And they're divided into neurotic, deluded, unhappy, messy, ridiculous thoughts, which are the source of all our suffering, which we can get rid of. The second category are the valid, reasonable, appropriate thoughts or mental states, which are reasonable, which we can develop. And the third category, they call them negative, positive, and neutral. There's no fourth category of thoughts and feelings and emotions in our mind, or opinions. There's billions of them. And they manifest as feelings, they manifest as thoughts, they manifest in a more subtle way, they manifest as intuition, all of this. We'll go into this. But there's three categories of them. The neurotic, deluded, ridiculous ones, the reasonable, valid ones, the virtuous ones, and then the other ones, I like to call them the mechanics of the mind. And they're called neutral, but not in the sense that they're not important. But here's the difference. So anger would be a negative state, it's destructive, it's exaggerating, we'll go into this, and it harms others, it harms me. Love is compassion and loving and altruistic, and it helps others. And then there's a third category, is like concentration, good memory. There's many of these, and they articulate these in Buddhist psychology, and it's very important to understand these. And these are what are developed to an incredible degree of clarity and subtlety in concentration meditation. We need these badly. I'll go into this more. But these are neutral insofar as a murderer and a meditator both need good concentration. A murderer and a meditator both need good mindfulness. And mindfulness is simply the capacity to not forget what you're doing moment by moment. As Lama Zopa says, thieves need mindfulness. So these, whether you're good or bad, we all need them. That's why I say they're the mechanics of the mind. So, the point I'm getting at here. Forget those. Let's look at the negative and the positive. And these are the ones that are the source of suffering and the source of happiness. And this is the stuff that Buddhism deals with in depth. So essentially, what's a pretty cup? I mean, you can argue that's neither good nor bad. It doesn't matter. It's not virtuous or non-virtuous. It's just an opinion. And much of what our cognitions are that. Now, equally, oh, Shuki's such a gorgeous guy, we might say, because you're in love with him, you know. So what's happening here is, don't forget what's happening, we'll go into that, but that's an opinion. His ex-wife does not think so. They say, you know, he gave her up for a younger version, chucked her out, and he took me. She will not think he's a gorgeous guy. She did at some point, but now she thinks he's a monster. We know this. We know we do this. So, or someone might go, oh, that's an ugly cup. So they're just basically opinions. These are quite simple ones. They're not going to cause a war. But Shuki's ugly or Shuki's divine, they could cause a war. Just about. Or I love that football team, I hate that football team. I mean, we call them emotions, but if it comes down to it, think about it. It's an opinion. It's an opinion. It's a viewpoint. It's a concept. It's a concept. What a pretty cup. It's a concept. He is gorgeous. It's a concept. He is ugly. They're opinions. If you think of it this way, it's quite sort of surprising. But we don't question them. Now the next point is this. I don't think what a pretty cup is an opinion, because an opinion implies an alternative opinion. No, what a pretty cup, that's not an opinion, that's the truth. Can you hear my point? That's right. So when I say he's ugly, I don't say, well, you know what, Shuki behaved a certain way, and I seem to feel at the moment that he's quite an ugly guy, but I could be wrong. Forget it. Do you understand my point? He is ugly, and I don't care who disagrees with it. It's the truth. This is the problem. Because we've programmed our mind with these opinions, and part of the deluded part of us is we believe in our opinions as being the truth. We can see this. So essentially what Buddha's saying, if we look at the first category, all the neurotic, deluded, weird, wacko, strange viewpoints that are opinions, but he says essentially they have no basis in reality. That's a bit of a shock. And the virtuous ones are valid, appropriate, reasonable, and are relatively speaking in sync with reality. This is his trip. This is his approach. But that's all you have to investigate the mind. That's his way of identifying what goes on in the mind. So the neurotic, deluded, I-based, fear-based, rubbish ones, which are the source, he says, of our pain and of our harming others, and therefore sowing seeds in the mind that will ripen as my future suffering. The positive thoughts, which inform my positive actions, which are relatively valid until they're really developed further, they'll be absolutely valid. They are the source of my happiness and the source of my ability to make others happy, which then sow seeds in the mind, which in the future will ripen as happiness. That's the essential, the fundamental law of karma, the principle of the law of karma. So, of course, when we hear that, what we hear, because we have this dualistic view of punishment and reward, we hear it as punishment and reward. We just can't help it. But logically, it can't be, because there's no punisher and rewarder. Not for the Buddha. It's a natural law. In the same way that if you eat too much sugar, you might get diabetes. You're not going to accuse your doctor of giving you diabetes. You know your doctor's not punishing you with diabetes. You know when the doctor says don't smoke, you might get diabetes, they're going to threaten you to send you to diabetes hell. No, you thank them for their kindness and giving you wise advice. So then you will stop the sugar because you don't want diabetes. That's the basis of morality in Buddhism. But to get to that point is so profound because we hear it as heavy and as on high and instructions and moralistic and punishment. We hear it this way. So it takes time to unravel that and try and hear it as a simple, reasonable instruction from a kind doctor called Buddha who has observed this exact process. Are we communicating here? It takes time to hear it like that. It's very interesting.
So, if I think Lama Yeshe's teachings are wonderful, isn't that an opinion?
Everything's an opinion. This is the point. This is what the point I'm getting at. Even saying that Dalai Lama's a Buddha. Now, the point is some of our opinions might be true, but they're still opinions. So the point of an opinion, saying an opinion purposely, I'm saying it purposely. In Buddhism, they wouldn't use that word. They'd say a view. Well, it's a more technical way of saying an opinion. But the Buddha's point, hear me, you didn't hear the second point, that virtues are in sync with reality. They are opinions though, but they're valid opinions, because there's an object that's true. That's the point he's making. So, okay, I could say, Okay, we'll go into it in more detail in a minute, but in general, the whole point of saying it's an opinion, they would say a viewpoint, a view, a concept, a thought. Opinion is a very powerful word, but hear it, that's all it is. Shuki is a kind person. It might also be true, but we've got to find out what's true and what's not. It's just the Buddha's point is when the opinions are the negative category, angry, how dare you do that to me, I hate you, you're the cause of all my suffering. That's a very loaded opinion. And there's layered and layers of assumptions in there, and the whole Buddhist approach is to unpack those assumptions and find the lack of truth in those, and that's the minefield. This is what's hard. So all the negative states of mind, which are the source of our pain, which we believe are true, to hear that they don't have a valid basis is too shocking. Because we get all confused. We've got to unpack, a lot of unpacking has to happen to sort out the facts from the fiction, you know. And that's the essence of Buddhist practice. That's the essence of Buddhist practice. Working on your own mind, identifying the contents of your mind, and learning to unravel, unpack and unravel all these millions of thoughts and feelings and emotions, all of which are opinions. And so the negative ones and the positive ones are often completely mixed together. You can't tell the difference. So it's a huge job to do. This is the actual job. That's why Lama Yeshe would say, be your own psychologist. That's what he means. Do you understand, people? It's a really intricate job. And the point is, you can use Jung's psychology, you can use Freud's, you can use whoever you like, but it's not going to be the same thing, because here we're talking a very specific approach of not looking at your external life and working yourself out, not looking at the brain. You can do all that if you want to. No one says you can't. But we're not discussing that here. We're looking at the actual thought processes themselves. We're looking at these stories, their cognitive stories, their conceptual stories. And we have to sort out the facts from the fiction. So of course we're using as our basis of what is fact and what is fiction, not just some absolute fact and fiction, because everything is dependent arising. Everything is contingent. You want to play music, and you put your hands on the piano and you play any note. No one says you can't do that. But if you decide to play Indian music, you've got to do according to the laws of Indian music. So it's referential, it's contingent, what is correct music and what is not. Are you seeing my point? There's not an absolute correct. If you're playing Bach, there's a different set of laws. If you want to heal somebody, oh, I think I'll stick a needle in somebody, I heard you can do that. Well, sorry, you better learn acupuncture first. You won't learn sticking needles in people from learning allopathic medicine. So everything's contingent and contextual and relational. That's what dependent arising means. Do you hear my point, people? So here we're using Buddha's model of what is valid, what is not, and that's for you to look into. Not to buy it into it and believe it's true. Analyse it, use it as a basis. Are we communicating? Do you see? So it's not just, oh, look at your mind and be mindful and it'll all go away. We have many naive views about the basis of the function of meditation, you know, really naive views. It's embarrassing, actually. Do you understand, people? So it's quite an intricate job. So why we have to sort out, step back, and then begin to even recognise that whatever arises out of my mouth is simply coming from what's in my mind, and that's the source, and 99% of it I'm not aware of because we don't pay attention, then it's a big job to do to unpack and unravel the contents of my mind. And why would I want to? Because they are the source of my happiness and the source of my suffering. That's why. It's practical, not moralistic, you know. So it takes courage to do this, because first of all, I believe I'm right. You know, Shuki's a creep, I believe I'm right. Why should I look at my mind? He cheated on me, of course he's a creep, I'll say. That is absolute logic as far as we're concerned. And no one will change my mind. But it's way more nuanced than that. There's so much more to look into. And it's not an easy job, because instinctively we want to blame somebody else. And we believe my view is correct. So they're the obstacles to why it's so hard. To even have the courage to accept that what goes on in my mind are my own tendencies, my own thoughts and my own opinions, and maybe some of them might not be valid, that takes courage to own. I mean, Lama Zopa says the vast majority of humans on this planet have no idea that what goes on in their mind plays any role at all in their life. So it's pretty stunning that we're even sitting here, even considering that what goes on in our mind plays a role, and that we're prepared to look at it. Wow. Pretty incredible already, you know. But the hardest job we'll do, for various reasons, as I've said. One is because it's not our tendency. Second, because we think life is out there. Is it not? Life is out there. The causes of happiness, suffering necessarily are out there. So we're always looking out there. We're geniuses at analysing out there. We're geniuses at looking at the brain, the DNA, the body, the things, the behaviour, the world, the things, the cups, the toilets, everything. We're geniuses at knowing about physical, external energy. We don't have techniques, and it's not being rude about us, to look into the mind. We do now, since Mr. Freud is marvellous. Psychotherapy, psychology, fantastic. It's subjective. Still though, the Buddha's is so fundamental, so sort of almost simple and yet difficult. So the first obstacle that makes it difficult for us to want to look in here is we believe the causes are out there. And that's not because we've studied science, that's instinctive. When I was a little girl and my sister Janet, was mean to me, no one had to teach me that her mean words caused me suffering. I just believed her words caused me suffering. And then I'd run and cry to mummy, Janet was mean to me, Janet was mean to me. No one teaches you that. That's just the way we are. That's samsaric. That's how we get born. Tendencies to have these delusions, So that's an obstacle. If the habit is strong, you tell me then, well, no, darling. Buddha would say, no, darling, it's more nuanced than that, Robina, darling. Janet's not the main cause of your suffering. Yes, she called you cockeye. Yes, she's mean to you. But that's not the main cause. I couldn't even comprehend it. It's too complex, because my habit to be angry and blaming is too strong. So that's the big obstacle. Second, because we really believe everything is out there. Third, because we don't have techniques, therefore, to learn to observe the mind, which is why this concentration technique is such a marvellous offering to the world, created by these Indians before the Buddha. And because Buddha's very unique view, and I would suggest that, I'm not saying you have to like it, is this extraordinary comprehension of the way the cognitive process itself, not the brain, but the actual thought processes work. It's an unpacking of an identification and a description of how these thoughts, what these thoughts are and how we identify them in our own mind. So it's quite a sophisticated job, actually. And I think we don't hear, well, these days with mindfulness, which is marvellous, there's a lot of really, and I want to point these out, a lot of really kind of wrong understandings. First of all, Buddha doesn't own the word mindfulness. He didn't make it up. But if you're going to use it and think you're being Buddhist, well, kindly be respectful to Buddha and at least use his definition. You can say you understand relativity and make up your own science. That's fine. But you'll confuse people. They think you're talking about, Einstein. But if you're talking your own relativity, well, kindly let them know in advance, please, that it's your view of mindfulness, not Buddha's. Because there's so many misconceptions. So the first attitude about meditation in general, and mindfulness in particular, is we tend to think it's an alternative to a pill. Meaning you only do it when you're miserable. Do you understand? Or when you notice the misery. That's ridiculous. The second is we think it's to make the thoughts go away. And of course, when you do it as an alternative to a pill, that's why you take the pill, to make the pain go away. If it doesn't seem to make the pain go away, you think, why bother taking a pill? I agree with you. But that's not the purpose of meditation. Third misconception is we think it's a relaxation technique. This is one of the worst ones. There are lots of relaxation techniques. We need relaxing. We're all crazy, it's fine. But there are marvellous ones that yoga teaches. Please do them. But the concentration technique is the opposite of relaxing. When you're really advanced, you'll be very relaxed, I promise. But it's like learning for the first time to drive a car, and the first time on the freeway, and someone says, relax, forget it, you'll crash in a minute. You're so busy being alert, watching this and watching that, and checking the cars and the gears and this. That's how you begin with meditation. You've got to have all the bits of you really on point, really doing the job properly, because the job is not to make the thoughts go away, is not to make the pain go away, is not to relax, it's to not follow every thought. That's all. We spend our lives, we know this, from the second we wake up in the morning until the second we go to sleep, we know there's this constant sound underneath, isn't there, of the thoughts. They even say in Western psychology you've got about 1,000 thoughts a second, Buddha agrees. And we all know it's just this hum underneath, isn't it? Hum, thousands, unceasing, 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 which we think is natural. And then deeper down we call it unconscious or subconscious. Of course it's natural, But the Buddha's, this view about single point of concentration is we can completely control it. We can completely unpack and unravel it. Control it first. Forget the unpacking and unraveling. We can control that process. That's what called concentration is. That's going to take a while. But so the job itself, the technique of focusing on something, let's say you take the breath as an example, and we'll do, it's a very simple technique. It's simply, the job isn't to make the thought go away, isn't to feel good, isn't to have some kind of vision, isn't to work out what's going on in the mind, isn't to relax. None of that is the job. The job is to concentrate. So it's like you're in a busy room of 100 people, all chatting away, and you're dying to hear what everybody says, which is our mind all the time, right? But you decide you're going to watch that point on the wall. You don't ask the people to shut up, you don't ask them to go away. They're not, they won't. But you've decided to strengthen your ability to focus. You don't get upset with the people, you don't get angry with the people, you don't try to work out what they're saying, you don't wish they'd all go away. You be brave enough to decide, I'm going to watch that point on the wall. That's my job. So we all know we can do this. You know yourself, you can be really focusing on reading something or watching something or doing something, and there's chatting away in the background, you can't even know what they're saying because you're so focused on what you're doing. So we do understand it. That's what we're trying to develop, but to an incredibly subtle degree. So what's the benefit of this? The benefit in the beginning is this, that you begin to develop the focus, which means the thoughts, if we're doing it well, will naturally seem less powerful. But that's not the goal. The goal is to concentrate. Now, you might have one meditation session when your mind is complete chaos, because you just had a fight with Shuki, and your mind is raging. So, excuse me, it's like the 100 people all shouting loudly. You don't ask them to go away, you don't ask them to be quiet, but you still try to watch that spot on the wall. You're training your mind to strengthen. You're strengthening your capacity to focus and to not follow all the thinking. Are you hearing me, people? So you have to have courage to do that, because the thoughts won't go away necessarily. So don't feel you had a bad meditation. You didn't. You're strengthening your concentration every time you do it. You're getting better at it every time. And eventually it will develop. You will develop the skill to go more deep, and therefore the thoughts will calm down. There's no question. But that's advanced. It might take 40 years for some people. That's not the goal, though. That's not the sign of success. But let me tell you this. The sign of success in the beginning, you have to blow my nose again. Where's my tissue? I've got one here. So sorry. So the sign of success. Oh, I've got it under there. There's another one. My chest and breast. Ladies have breasts where they can tuck things. It's very helpful. That was too much information, wasn't it? Okay, so the sign of success, I would say, when we start to do it, we do a bit every day, like 5 minutes in the morning to start your day, it's great, is not that you had the thoughts go away, not that you felt good, not that you relaxed. That's not the sign of success. That's a bonus. But the sign of success is this, that because you're focusing, you're paying attention to the spot on the wall, you're paying attention to the breath, but you can't help out of the corner of your eye, you understand, notice all the thoughts. Now, that's good. That's fantastic. So what you've done for that 5 minutes is step out of your own head. Normally we're like this, you know? It's like lying awake at night and you can't get to sleep. We all know that experience. You don't remember a single thought you had. Even as you're having the thoughts, you're so unconscious of them. Isn't that true? There's no proper awareness of what we're thinking. We're just being dragged by our nose by this crazy energy, isn't it? That's how we are all the time. While we're even doing the dishes, driving the car, we're completely unaware of this constant drama in the background. So at least when you're focusing on the breath for 5 minutes, the thoughts are still crazy. They've always been crazy. But suddenly you can't help but be aware of them out of the corner of your eye. That's fantastic. Why? Because they are what you have to learn to become familiar with. Because they are the problem. And the good ones are there too. Being mindless and not aware of what's going on in your mind is a disaster. And that's our normal life. So then naturally, because when it arises as pain, then that's when we're desperate for it to go away. But that's like having cancer and you've got pain, you take a painkiller and you think you solved the problem. No. You've got to deal with the problem. So therefore, just like when you go to your oncologist, They don't want to go, oh, let's just make all, I don't want to look at that cancer. No, we don't want to look at that. That's horrible. Let's not look at that. That's horrible. Let's give you a pill. No, you want them to get their microscope and look at your disgusting cancer and work out exactly what the problem is. And the oncologist is excited to do that, right? Because they want to interpret your cancer. We have to interpret our own inner cancer. We have to be delighted to look at it. We have to want to identify, oh my God, there's jealous thoughts, there's anger, there's pride. Well, that's attachment to this, there's attachment to that, that's this, that's that. You want to be your own analyst and observe not the object that happened, not Shuki's actions, not his problem, not your genes, not your DNA, not your brain cells, the actual thoughts themselves. This is the skill. So you want to hear the thoughts. The doctor wants to see the disgusting cancer because then they can identify it and find the solution. This is the same here. So you have to have courage to do this. Because we can't stand all this pain, and we're going to discuss why later, we naturally, when he leaves me for the younger version, the pain, the depression, the grief, the anger, the hurt is unbearable. Of course it's unbearable. But this is the point again, to be really clinical about it. When we're in that pain, and you ask me, tell me about your pain, Robina. Tell me about the grief. Tell me about your jealousy. Tell me about the anger. I will give a detailed description of the object of my anger. Shuki. It's not wrong. I'm not saying, but that's what anger is thinking, what jealousy is thinking. It's obsessed with the object that we believe did it to me. This is very instinctive and natural. And that's fine. Buddha's not saying it's right that he cheated on me. He agrees he cheated on me. But the Buddha's view is so intricate, so precise, so pinpoint. He's got explanations in karma for why it's happening in the first place, which is our big question. Why is this happening to me? Karma answers that one. We'll go there in a minute. But here we're dealing with the actual day-to-day, dealing with your own mind. And that means your own thoughts, which are what underpin your emotions. That's why you have to have develop this focus, stepping out of your head, so you can hear the chaos, not make it go away. Because the chaos is like the cancer. You have to identify the problem, then fix it. So we have to have courage to do that. And that means we have to, even having the theory, Buddha's view that it's not permanent, it's not in the core of your being, it is not who you really are. So that gives you courage to not just want to make it all go away, and not just blame everybody else, and not just have guilt, which is the alternative. They're all useless. Is to identify, to put your microscope of your own mind on it, so to hear the thoughts crystal clear. Because the crucial point in Buddhist psychology, which initially seems weird to us, like I said before, everything that we experience, the most intense depression, the most powerful anger, the most overwhelming grief, the most terrible jealousy, these feelings that we experience, that's the tip of the iceberg. That's when our body is involved. But they are all underpinned by, they're all expressions of, way deep down, these powerful habitual conceptual stories that we have programmed our mind in for countless lives, Buddha says. Are we communicating here? Mm-hmm. So it really demands courage to do this, to go beyond. So, when I tell you what Shuki did, and you're my kind therapist, and you really know I'm trying to work on myself, you'll say, that's great, Robina, you've told me about Shuki, now tell me about your mind. That's really hard for us. We can't distinguish between the object of my anger, you see. We can't distinguish between the grief and the person who caused it. That's what's fascinating, because the object is so massive for us. So the skill of being able to actually hear your own thoughts and unpack and unravel them and do this analysis of them in a really intricate way it is quite sophisticated. But to do that, you have to have a model of the mind, which is we're using the Buddha's here, not Jung's, not Freud's. Because the Buddha's saying, yes, Shuki's a creep. I agree, Robina. But that's his problem. What's yours, babe? And this is what's hard. And it's not blame. It should be like a joy for us to want to do this because we're getting to the source of the problem. In other words, it's fine to blame Marlboro and sue them even for your cancer. But it won't help you get rid of cancer, will it? You've got to deal with the cancer. Let's forget Marlboro, Robina. Stop blaming them. Let's look at the cancer itself, honey. See what we can do. Same here. And that's hard. This is the hardest job we'll ever do. To actually own. And this is really hard You know, even if you've been a Buddhist for years and tried to do this job, once we're in the midst of this fight, say, between two people, I mean, I go to all these Buddhist centres and people have dramas with each other. I mean, join the universe. We have dramas with each other, And when the karma is very strong between two people, let's say, good Buddhists, whoever, I don't care, husband, wife, child, mother, colleagues, just recently at one place, really good practitioners. So two people, let's say, both with lots of anger. When you hear them talk, we're all the same. They are talking about the other person and what the other person did. And even when we're we're good little Buddhists trying to do this job, when you're really caught up in it, we literally cannot see how our angry story is a distorted, overblown, exaggerated description coming from our mind of that person's actions. We can't, in other words, Buddhist view, we can't distinguish between the facts and the fictions. And this is why it's so difficult. Because when you're in the midst of that, everything in your being is believing that angry story. And we can't sort out what's my story and what did they do in reality. This is why it is so difficult. So we should be very humble with ourselves and not guilty and not ashamed, because it's really intricate stuff. It's really deep and painful. Are we communicating? Mm-hmm. So when you first learn, you first study, say, and I'm suggesting to Shuki that he should invite Venerable Sangha Kadra, because she's a scholar, she's studied for years. We studied together like 40 years ago. Now she's done more, she's got way more knowledge than I have. But she'd be really marvellous. She's staying on for a while longer, I think, yeah? So to invite her to say, to study the texts, I think it's in Lama Zopa's program, you should check, but to study the mind, called Lorig, Mind and Awareness, which is covering all this stuff. So naturally when you study it, it's completely technical. You'll think, what's this got to do with life, It's technical. The epistemological model of the mind is beyond fascinating, but it's unbelievably technical. And it's not describing the brain, it's describing the actual cognitive thoughts themselves. It's extraordinarily sophisticated, but it's fascinating. And this is the basis of this job that we're talking about. You can't just look at cancer and think you understand. You've got to study being a doctor for years. So you can interpret what you're seeing. It's the same here. You can be a neuroscientist and know every tiny brain cell in the universe, but that's not the job we're discussing here. We're discussing recognizing, even intellectually, first the theories, is that like I said before, all of the stuff in here, in the mental consciousness, they are opinions, they're viewpoints, they are literally thoughts. But because I've practiced angry thoughts for so long, I come into this life and it explodes in a millisecond when my sister hurts me. So we think of it as feelings and emotions. And it is that. But I'll only notice the anger when it hits the body, isn't it? When it comes out the mouth. Oh, I must be angry. I didn't notice before. So when you're depressed, though, which is internalized anger, you only notice you're depressed when you can't get out of bed one morning because you're inert. So this is the other obstacle, we only notice what we're thinking and feeling when it hits the surface, when it comes to what we call emotion. That's a bit like you're driving your car on the freeway and your wheels are about to fall off. Oh, my wheels are about to fall off. What do I do? Well, you're going at 100 kilometres an hour. It's a bit late to ask what are you going to do. You should have had maintenance. And I mean that sincerely. We don't have maintenance for our minds because we don't think like that. So we wait until the wheels are falling off. We wait until I want to kill Shuki or myself before we realise we've got a problem. And it's just too late. Because why? Because we don't have maintenance for our mind, which means we don't have techniques to observe the workings of our mind beneath the emotions, which is why you've got to have some concentration. Even a little bit. Even the bit of training in it. Stepping out of your head. To begin to listen. Not just on your cushion. You do your 5 minutes in the morning. It's easy to sit there and watch the spot, watch the breath, and hear the chaos. But you see, the problem is this too. Because you think you're trying to make the thoughts go away, when you hear the thoughts you get upset. You think that you're supposed to feel nice and you don't feel nice, so you get upset. You think you're supposed to relax and you feel tense, you get upset. So you've got the wrong expectations of what the technique is. You're doing the wrong technique. The job is just to practice concentrating. No one says you should. How can you possibly succeed first go? It's like saying, learn to ride a bike, Robina. You're 3 years old, you hop on the bike on one side, you fall off the other, and you burst into tears and kill yourself. Oh, I can't ride a bike. I mean, people would laugh at you. You've got to get on again, and again, and again, until you accomplish it. Same here. What you're accomplishing is concentration. Not relaxing, not making the thoughts go away, not feeling something, not having a vision. Just concentrating. It's a powerful skill that enables you to step out of your head. So then what happens? You bring that to bear once out of your 5 minutes off your cushion. You're now learning the skill as you're focusing on the driving. You're focusing on the cars. You're focusing on the driving. But you're now more conscious of what's happening behind in here. Whereas normally you wouldn't be. So normally you know you're tense, but you don't know what's going on in your mind. That's why you're tense. We think it's physical. Yeah, the physical is just a symptom. Because you're not looking at your mind. You're not aware of all the crazy thoughts that you've got up. All these stories are building up and you can't even hear them. So naturally you're tense at the wheel, then a car jumps in front and you want to kill him. But once you start this one, slowly, you start becoming more aware of your thoughts even as you're driving. So you're not just paying attention to the cars, you're also noticing. And you're telling yourself, relax, Robina, it's okay, shut up girl, just give it a break, it's okay, everything's cool, you're late, it doesn't matter. You're giving yourself a little talk. Which is what we do anyway, and what we should be doing all the time, adjusting all the crazy thoughts. So your anxiety's coming, your guilt, your shame, I'm late for work, they're going to kill me, blah, blah, blah. And then the wisdom in you says, shut up, Robina, give it a break, it's cool, honey. You talk yourself through it, you be your own therapist. And I'm sincere. This is a simple way of practicing every day. You're becoming more conscious of the thoughts beneath the emotions, before the wheels fall off. That's the skill, and we get better and better and better at that. That's the amazing skill of Buddha's approach. So you've got to have courage to hear the thoughts, to own them, to even welcome them. This is difficult, but if you want to push them all away, you just go crazy. It's no benefit. It doesn't work like that. So you can have good mindfulness meditation and feel very nice. People can do it for years. It's only it's not even the solution. It's not even right. It's not the wrong approach. You just feel good. The aim is not to feel good. Have sex is much more fun. Eat chocolate ice cream is more fun. It's a real misconception of the benefit of it, of the function of it. You know, a real misconception. If you do feel good, I'm happy. It's a bonus. We need it. But it's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is, in fact, to help you hear your thoughts even more clearly. That's the point. So now you know the cancer and how it works, and now you have the solution. Are we communicating? So you've got to have courage to do this. Where's my glasses? What happened?
Next to the plant.
Next to the plant. Oh, there we go. So any more questions about that? We could go on further. We'll go more about this, but any more questions? What time's lunch?
Lunch 1.
Oh, we've got hours to go. Oh, great. Okay, we've got hours. So, okay, any questions about that general approach? And then I'll go into detail about the states of mind themselves so that we can learn to distinguish the neuroses from the good ones, the crazy viewpoints from the valid viewpoints. Any questions in general about that approach? Does it make sense? And if not, please ask me questions about the approach, you know. Anybody?
Hi.
Where are you? Yes, sweetheart.
How do you difference an opinion from a natural law?
That's what I'm about to talk about later. That's detail. We'll go into that soon. Okay. I'm asking you to, this approach that I've described, if there's any questions about the approach, I will go into the details later. I'll answer that later.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
When you go to decipher an action you did that you want to...
That's next, that's later.
Okay.
I'm just asking the general, it's like the technique itself of learning to concentrate and why you would want to concentrate. That's the technique, I'm trying to get that clear. Do you understand that? And it might sound simple, but actually we get it very confused. Okay, can someone repeat back to me what I said about what mindfulness meditation is? And then I'll know that we're under communicating. Simply speaking. Yeah, go on. Tom.
You concentrate, technically.
Pardon?
You concentrate, right?
Oh.
And at the same time, you observe
No.
the thoughts?
No.
So
no. Technically, no. You're concentrating
Yeah.
on the breath. The job is to concentrate. The technique, the skill is to drive the car in the right lane, isn't it? On the freeway, you've got to stay in the right lane. But you can't help but notice many things happening, right? You can't help but notice things happening, but you're not observing them, you're not concentrating on them, you're not trying to analyse them. Your job is to drive in the right lane. Are you hearing me? But you can't help but notice everything else. So you're watching your breath. The job is, breath is an example. You're concentrating, you're training, you're training to concentrate. We can't concentrate, we're hopeless. But you're training in concentration. That's the job to be done. You can't help but notice the crazy thoughts all go mad. As they say, this technique is described in terms of 9 stages of development in the texts. They all say in the texts that one of the signs of success at the first of the 9 stages is we think we're getting worse. We think we're having more thoughts because you're starting to now notice them. Well, normally we're blind. We're just observing, watching, doing the dishes, driving the car, but all the tension's building up, but we're not noticing. We're not paying it. We're not noticing because we've never paid attention. So this technique is to help you step out of your head, to focus on the breath, not to make not to relax, not to make the thoughts go away, not to do analysis of the thoughts, not to even observe the thoughts, not to have a vision, none of that. It's simply you'll naturally be noticing the thoughts, especially if the thoughts are really crazy and they're wild and shouting. That's fine. You're training yourself to concentrate. So then you bring that to bear in your life because you've stepped out of your head for the 5 minutes. You've separated, you're training yourself with discipline. So you can't help but notice them. You don't observe them, you can't help but notice them. And then gradually, as you're doing your daily life, as you're driving the car, which is your job, as you're doing the dishes, that's your job, you're noticing your unhappy thoughts, you're noticing you're annoyed, and that's slowly the skill we develop more and more, which is why we want concentration, to do that actual job of working with the mind. That's the second mode of meditation. That's called insight. And that's where we do the job of working with it. That's the job she's talking. That's the job you're asking. That's the job. Do you understand? The focusing is a skill, a technique, so we can learn to develop the ability to focus more clearly, so we can do the job in the second mode of meditation to be your own therapist. Do you understand? So, did you have a question about that?
No, I just wanted to make sure, technically how it's done, because
So, if you have a question, then good. So no question then. So you're understanding it now. So say it back to me in your words, very briefly. Concentration meditation. What are you doing? And why are you doing it?
I'm doing
very briefly
the meditation in order to develop concentration.
And why do you want concentration?
Because that way I can deal through my mind.
Why do you want concentration?
To deal with...
No, that has no meaning, deal with. Why do you want concentration?
It's a tool.
Why do you want concentration? To do what?
To be able to change things.
And how can, based on what? Change what? Change what?
Opinions, feelings.
Change your mind. From what to what?
From being, from depending on something that is not really
No. Change your mind from what to what? Keep it simple.
From being disturbed to being more focused?
No. You get focused so that you can distinguish the neurotic thoughts from the positive thoughts.
Okay.
That's it. That's the answer. That's it.
It's like taming.
Don't make up stories all the time, Tal. You love giving all these commentaries about things. You just make it confused. Keep it simple.
It helps me.
It doesn't help you. You're saying the wrong thing, so it does not help you.
But it's taming.
Tal,
no?
You just make up these dramas. It sounds lovely, but it's just you throw it into a wrong direction. Keep it simple and just be humble and hear it as a technique and listen simply. Don't go then add a little piece to it. It makes it kind of all la-di-da like religion, It's not helpful at all. Just hear the words. So you're getting there. It's okay. Any more questions? Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Any more questions? No? Enough? That'll do. Okay. Let's now go into detail. All right, opinions about it, like her question and your question. And what you're sort of vaguely saying, Tal. It's okay. Okay, so now let's go into it. Let's look at the negative states of mind, these negative conceptual stories, and the positive one. Or look at the negative first and try and identify what Buddha is saying about them, why they're a problem, why they're the cause of our suffering, what is their problem, what is wrong with them. And don't hear it as guilt and don't hear it as moralistic, it's technical, you know. So, okay, this is the negative states of mind, the positive states of mind, and the neutral ones. They're the technical sides of our mind, you know. So, okay, so the negative ones, there's like a hierarchy of them, you know. There's like, I like to say it that way. The root one, the deepest, most primordial mistake that our mind makes, and again remember Buddha's point, that all the unhappy ones labelled negative under this heading, all the neurotic ones, they have two main, these have two main characteristics. And you said the word correctly. One of the terms is disturbing emotion. Well, that's pretty evident, isn't it? Check the last time you're angry, depressed, jealous. It's definitely disturbing. To you, forget about everybody else, you know. You're disturbed. There's no doubt about it. That's really clear to all of us. But our trouble is, I know I'm disturbed, but hey, it's Shookie's fault. That gets us off. It throws us, you know. It is disturbing. The second characteristic is totally fascinating, and this one, I've implied it several times already, but until we really study the Buddhist model, we won't quite twig with us, because it seems so abstract and strange. The second characteristic is indicated by this other word called delusion. Okay? Delusion. So I noticed that in the English language, it's probably one of the few, Italian, French, German, I don't know about Hebrew, whatever word you have for delusion, there's no real word that conveys it, and it's really an incredible word that is so completely bullseye in identifying precisely what Buddha says is why these states of mind are the cause of our suffering. And this is the business of being wrong opinions. Misconceptions. They're opinions that are distorted opinions. Their key function is that they exaggerate the characteristics of the object. And therefore they're all thoughts, they're all opinions, they're all conceptions, but it's hard to see that. When I'm sitting there as a little girl having an angry fit, screaming and yelling and shouting, to say that I'm having a bunch of misconceptions, it sounds hilarious, doesn't it? What are you talking about, you know? Misconceptions. But they're programmed in our mind from much practice. So the deluded states of mind are misconceptions. They are delusional. They cause you to not see things clearly. Their main function in being delusional is to exaggerate characteristics of the object. And when we spell it out, it's kind of evident to us. So if I'm attached to Shookie, if I'm in love with Shookie, we know he appears the most divine person in the universe. We know that. We can't believe how divine he is. And we really believe in that it's a viewpoint. It really seriously is a viewpoint. Attachment in this function is a viewpoint that is like, I've got, causes Shookie to look like the most divine person I have ever met. We know that. Just forget Shookie, look at the chocolate cake. If you like chocolate cake, if you're attached to chocolate cake, it means when first you think about it, we'll go into this in more detail, but just the bare bones function, when the cake is in front of your eyes and there's that brown triangle there, excuse me, attachment doesn't see the brown triangle, it sees this divine, delicious, vibrating, gorgeous thing, so delicious that you can't wait to get it in the mouth. We know that experience, do we not? So the trouble is with identifying, this is called attachment, okay? This is called attachment, I'll go into it. But the trouble is, because we also know that it feels delicious, it feels very mean of Buddha to tell us that it's a delusion, to tell us we've got to get rid of it, because we think it's also the cause of happiness, and that's the big problem, and we'll go into that later. So, okay, if I'm angry with Shookie, I know he looks really ugly to me. I can't even, especially if he's given me up to someone else, I can't even hear his name. It's so painful, isn't it? We know this. We know this. So Okay, so there's this hierarchy of these nonsense. There's a hierarchy of these delusions, of these misconceptions, of these distorted, exaggerated opinions that come full of emotion because of practice. This is the meaning of being in samsara. The Buddha, being in samsara, is being caught up in this nonsense, which we think is normal and natural. But he says it's mental illnesses and we can get rid of them. In fact, it's interesting, the word mainly they use in Tibetan for the term in Sanskrit for these nonsense is the term klesha, Sanskrit. Whatever the Tibetan word is, I don't know, but it's generally speaking translated in English as affliction. Now, I don't know about in Hebrew, but this is the most weird word in English, you know. It's medieval. Nobody uses it. Oh, I have an affliction. Do you understand? It's ridiculous. So all the more we use it, you just make it sound like religion, you know. Affliction, all the afflictions. Well, you know, listen to it carefully. You read the description in the... You got the right word. What's the word in Hebrew? Is that affliction? Affliction. Affliction.
No, the word affliction or the meaning of the word?
No, the word. What's the word? And how do you describe the meaning? Translate it back to me.
Something disturbing.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, good. This is very fascinating. You listen to this now. You listen to this. I think a much better modern translation of klesha, you wait for it, mental illness. That's right. That's right. Mental illness. Hear it, because we have such a powerful definition of that in our culture, it's like horrific to hear it.
And that's what it does.
Much better.
I know that. That's why I'm saying it. He likes to verify what I say. That's okay, like Tom. They're both a good pair. In each way. You make it all romantic and he just, never mind, they're great. Both of them. So listen, people, listen to this, technically listen to it. Affliction, if you look at the dictionary in English, it's usually mental pain. Mental, this anguish and suffering. Well, it seems to me, so Buddha's talking about the mind, right? He's talking about the mind. He's talking about, we've got neurotic states of mind and positive states of mind. The neurotic states of mind are known as afflictions in Sanskrit. Well, mental illness. I mean, technically, it is the most perfect term. It's just it's too shocking for us because we think that's way over the outer end there. Do you understand what I mean? They're mentally ill and I'm normal. But really, to put it this way, is very accurate. What Buddha is essentially saying, and I'm serious now, is we are all mentally ill as long as we have any ego grasping, any attachment, any anger, any jealousy, any depression at all, any anxiety, any worries, which we think are completely normal. So he's got a more radical view, in other words, of mental health. You get my point? Really and literally, these words, but because they're so powerful for us in modern psychology, it's very shocking to speak this way. But it's so accurate. The words are so accurate. Buddha's got a more radical, more nuanced view of mental suffering. He says we're all mentally ill, it's a question of degree. And that's what he's literally saying. And we can be free of all of it. But so it's very interesting to think like this. That's what affliction means. So there's two characteristics. One is it's just plain old painful, disturbing is perfect. But the other one is the way the states of mind function. They lie. They are literally lies in my mind. This is another way to say it very clearly that Buddha's saying. But because it comes with such emotion, it seems ridiculous because we can feel the disturbingness, but we just think it's a feeling. And then secondly, I know I'm angry, I know I'm jealous, but everything in my being feels that I'm allowed to be angry and I'm allowed to be jealous because you know what? Because he cheated on me. So literally for us, literally, Shukhi is the actual main cause. It's like his action injected anger into me. His action injected jealousy into me. That's how we think. So, of course, why would I want to look at my jealousy? I'm allowed to be jealous. Why would I want to look at my anger? This is the problem we have. It's so painful because we think of it also as blame and guilt. So you mean if it's my fault, I want to kill myself. Buddha's not talking like that. Although when you hear Tibetans, they're more fundamentalists than the most fundamentalist Southern Baptists, I tell you. They're like 10th century, they're medieval. 10th 10th century, in the way they talk. If you hear them, it's like hellfire and brimstone. They're hilarious, you know, Tibetans, how they talk. Very medieval, it's true. But when you really unpack it all, there can't be blame, there can't be punishment and reward, because there's no punisher and there's no rewarder. We've got to think that through really carefully, you know. This takes a while to get through. So all Buddha's doing is pointing out to us what is causing us suffering. We should be crying with compassion for ourselves, for having anger and hurt and pain. It's hurting us, but we keep hearing it as guilt. I shouldn't have it. I'm bad, you know. So either blame Shuki or blame ourselves. This is the tragedy of ego, you know. Yes, Betty.
You mentioned many times the word exaggeration.
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
Phenomena. I see Shuki, he made something, and I exaggerate.
That's right. There you go.
The exaggeration
That's
made
right.
me think that it's there.
Well, that's a secondary part of it. Let's go into this.
Right.
Let's go into it more
question
detail.
Is there nothing there?
Oh, no, that's too more advanced. That's way too advanced. But we're heading towards that. This is the general idea of what is real and what's not.
So
And-
the exaggeration for the moment, the exaggeration that
yes.
that
So,
mass,
yeah.
mass
We'll go into this now.
is what makes us suffer.
Yeah, exactly. That's what Buddha's saying. So that's what he's saying.
For good and bad.
Yeah, all of this.
Positive and negative.
No. Okay, no, not like that. The negative ones, so-called, in their nature, in this hierarchy. Okay, let's go through them. So you've got your negative states of mind and your positive. Let's talk about the positive ones for the first. They're called kindness, love, generosity, patience, forgiveness. So if we were able to identify those in a raw form, which we never have, we always have, you see, okay, we've got the negative ones and we have the positive. So call the negative ones pollution, if you like. Well, we never have even a positive one without some pollution. It's not as if we have a perfect 100% love and then an evil 100% attachment. We don't have them like that. You know, they're all mixed together, and that makes it so much more hard to see and to identify. If, you know, the weeds in your garden grew at this end and the flowers grew at that end, it'd be easy, wouldn't it? But they all get mixed together. And if you don't know botany, you can't tell the difference between the herbs and the weeds. Same here. So, the negative ones, the positive ones, the Buddha says, are valid, relatively speaking, until we've realised emptiness. We'll go into this. They are relatively valid, relatively accurate. There's a validity in them, because they're in sync with dependent arising. So reality is, Buddha says reality, heading to what you're saying. The reality, ultimate reality, is that everything is empty. We'll go into that later. Forget that. Conventionally, reality is expressed as everything is interdependent, speaking simply. So have a look at this. Let's say he and I are just having a chat. We're just friends, let's say. And I'm laughing at his jokes, and he laughs at my jokes, and I hear his opinions, and he hears my opinions, and I sympathise with his knee ache, and he sympathises with my, whatever. Then you can say, oh, look at Robina and Shuki. What you technically say is, look, they're experiencing love for each other and they're experiencing compassion for each other. That's the two main states of mind that we're experiencing. A delight in each other's happiness and empathy with each other's pain. They're virtues. But have a look at the reality. Reality is that everything's interdependent. Reality is that we all are connected. Speak simply. So, when we've got some virtue, there's some sense of that, isn't there? While we're having this chat to each other, we're not so aware of me. Each of us is aware of the other. So it's almost like my I has expanded out to encompass him. That's interdependence. That's reality. And that's what virtues, they're infused with that. Now look what happens when we start to fight. Suddenly attachment comes, anger comes, jealousy. The we is cut in half. And there's two separate, unhappy, paranoid, miserable, lonely, self-pity me's. That's not reality. But delusions are in sync with non-reality. That poor me, separate me, lonely me, ugly me, mean Shuki, ugly Shuki. That's insanity. Those states of mind are not in sync with any interdependence at all. And they made up their own ridiculous stories. That's why they're painful. That's why the delusional aspect gives rise to the disturbing. Because we're believing in non-truths, we're believing in lies, and they're ancient. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay. Yes, sweetheart.
Let's say a person who is more concentrated, practice the law.
Yes.
So, and he knows not to, he doesn't blame outside conditions.
Yeah.
And as you spoke about karma,
Yes.
his usual experience is
Yep.
having difficulties. Let's say he's not so in finding a job,
Okay,
or
good.
in
Yep, good.
things are not so, and he's not so well in his physicality. He's
Okay,
not
good.
so healthy.
So what's the question? Yep,
So the
good.
question is, and he's a well advanced
Yep.
student.
Got it.
So still, he feels.
What's the question?
The question is, what now? He observes his thoughts. He doesn't blame outside the.
Do you mean how would he be experiencing it if he's doing all this?
How he would be more.
I will tell you. I will tell you. I will tell you. It's not complicated. Just that we're not used to thinking this way. I have to use ordinary examples all the time.
What?
I have to use ordinary examples.
Okay.
Let's say you've got a beloved child, and they're sick.
Very good.
Let's say that. And you're worried, you're anxious, and you don't know what to do because you don't have medical skills. Then you'd be freaking out, you'd be depressed, you'd be miserable, you'd be panicking. And let's say you can't find a doctor. You're completely hopeless because you don't know how to interpret the problem, isn't it? So you're thinking, oh my God, this is a disaster, they're going to die, I don't know what to do, because you don't have tools. Then you'd be feeling terrible, wouldn't you? And meaning you don't know why it's happening and you don't know how to fix it. Then you'd be miserable, right? Do you agree? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, even sometimes they are not so. Sometimes they are not. You cannot cure.
But my point is that we don't have the way, we don't have the wisdom to know how to interpret the problem and how to fix it. And I'm talking a sickness, an ordinary physical thing, because you don't have medical skills. So then, let's say the same here, the same with yourself. Let's say you're a normal person with a samsaric world, you think your mother made you, you don't know why you get angry, you know your mother wasn't that mean to you, but you can't stand her, you're confused when things happen, you don't know why there's suffering over here, you don't know why the Palestinians want to bomb the Israelis, we don't understand anything, so we panic, we have fear, you don't believe in God, you don't know what to do. What I'm saying is, in your mind, everything is, I don't know what's happening, I don't know why things are happening, I have no explanations. No wonder you feel neurotic, no wonder you feel depressed, no wonder you're freaking out. A good Christian, a good Muslim who has faith in God, even that's a viewpoint that they've got. I remember in Malaysia a couple of years ago, I read about some Air Asia flight went in the ocean, you know, and they were all Malaysians, all Muslims on the plane, mostly. And one Malaysian mummy and daddy were asked, how do you feel about the death of your daughter? My point is this, they had a clear philosophical view in their mind, they had faith in God, and they were peaceful. They said, she belongs to God, He has taken her back. What I'm saying here is, now whether or not that's true, even I don't care right now, all I'm saying is they had an explanation. And they had an explanation that worked for their mind, so they were peaceful. That's the source of your happiness. So the views in our mind are why we're happy or not. But we don't think of it this way. So, if you look, Buddha's view then, you've got a person who understands karma, who's trying to practice it, who understands their mind is not physical, who doesn't blame Shuki, who's trying to deal with their anger, who's good their own therapist, has got some concentration, has practiced it, thinks about emptiness. Well, if you're doing it properly, and as you're learning those theories, slowly you put meat on the bones and it becomes experiential. So when bad things happen, you could even be, you know, let's say Shuki, I'm a practitioner, well I'm not, let's pretend I'm a practitioner, and Shuki has just left me, and I'm devastated, but I'm working on it. And you meet me for the first time after years, you say, how are you, Robina? I'll say, I'm really well, how are you, darling? You wouldn't even know I had a problem, because I've got a way to interpret it, and I'm working with it, and that takes time. Do you see my point?
Yeah.
So when we have some model of wisdom that interprets the situation that we're working with, that brings, so if you're a really good doctor, your heart will be beating because it's your child, but you'll be focusing on your medical, you know how to interpret it, you'll know what to do, so you won't have a panic attack. It's the same with ourselves and with life. All Buddhism is a world view, a way of explaining why Syria, why Malaysia, why aeroplane crashes, why good things, why rich, why poor. When you have that view and you're buying into that view, then that's the view that you use to interpret yourself and everything else, so your mind calms down. And then you add compassion to it, you get courage to never give up, to want to help people. So everything comes down to what's in your mind. You with me or not?
Yeah.
That's up to us, what views we decide to use.
So you believe I understand.
Go on.
So that's our goal, I think. That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
And so my mind can develop to this extent.
Yeah, of course.
Like if Shuki left you and you have another one and he
Another
also
one.
leaves
Oh.
you.
I mean, I'll just have another one.
That's your
Yeah, I mean, whatever, darling.
And,
But the point, all the point, sweetheart, all the point here is, as Buddha says, everything that goes on in here is the source of my happiness and suffering, meaning the viewpoints. They're all viewpoints. And when I understand their viewpoints, he is suggesting some of those viewpoints are neurotic, delusional, disturbing, and have no basis in reality. And the more you think them, the more miserable you'll be. And the other viewpoints are valid. As you increase those, you get more happy. As you lessen these, you even get more happy. That's really what he's saying. But it mightn't be evident initially that that's how it is. It looks complex, you know. Do you understand? Because everything in the end is interpretation. So, continuing now with the delusions, with the neuroses, with the misconceptions, with the mental illnesses. There's a hierarchy of them. There's thousands. I mean, the Buddhism says there's 80 to 72,000 or something, different delusions, variations of all of them. But you can narrow it down, I tell you, to 3. But if you understand these well, you really can understand Buddha's approach to life, and yourself and the world, I promise you. Or half a dozen, maybe. And of course, these words are not what modern psychology uses. We use complex concepts every day, coming up with new theories and new concepts, and that's okay. But Buddha's tune hasn't changed in 2,500 years, you know, these words. So the delusion, the negative heading, the negative, positive, and then the third block, the mechanics of the mind. Okay, so the root one, the mother of them all, the fundamental one that drives everything, the most primordial. And the last one to go, because that's when we achieve liberation. We finally get rid of the last one. So this one is called, technically it's called in Tibetan, ma-ripa, unawareness, ignorance. So it's a simple word, but let's analyse it. Okay, let's analyse it for a second. But it's known colloquially as ego-grasping, which is a lovely phrase, ego-grasping, self-grasping. So all the negative states of mind, interestingly, have this energy of grasping. They're frantic, they're fear-based. That's what's fascinating, by the way. People often say, where's fear in Buddhism, in the list of all the negative states of mind? You won't find it, because all the delusions, all the negative states are in the nature of fear. This is so fascinating. They're in the nature of fear and panic. They've got the nature of intense grasping, you know, like so much fear. So anyway, ignorance of what? Well, ignorance in general is really not complicated. If you say to me, what's that? And I'll go, oh, I don't know. Well, that's ignorance. It's very simple, and that ignorance is easy to fix. You'll tell me it's a cup, I'll say, thank you very much. I now have got wisdom, isn't it? But the ignorance we've got is double trouble ignorance. Buddha says, because of this ego grasping, this maripa, not only does that cause us not to know how things exist ultimately and even conventionally. And that's abstract to us. We have ignorance that doesn't understand the ultimate nature of reality, and that's where everything is leading to in Buddha's teachings. In general, we have ignorance also of cause and effect, which is all of this is so much suffering. But the ultimate ignorance is this one of how things exist, which technically is dependent arising and emptiness. We will go there, okay. So that's the ignorance, that's the root of all the problems. But it's double trouble. Not only do we not know how things exist ultimately, the trouble is this ignorance has made up its own fantasy views that are the exact opposite of reality. So it's a bit like, what's that, Robina? Oh, that's an iPad. And I'm convinced it's an iPad, and nothing you tell me will say it's not an iPad. And in other words, I'm living in La La Land, aren't I? Not only do I not know the truth, but I made up a lie. That's what ignorance does. Not only do we not know how things exist ultimately, ignorance has made up not just a vague lie, but an exact opposite lie. And that's the trouble. So it's like ripping off your skin to make that lie go away, because we are totally addicted to it. In other words, using Buddha's words, ultimately, Everything is interdependent, which is conventional, and that leads you to ultimately realise there is no inherent I. Just let's say the word simply, we'll go into it later. Ignorance does not know that there is no inherent I. Ignorance doesn't know that. So that's ignorance. Oh, I don't know what it is. That's easy. If we had just that ignorance, we could get enlightened in a couple of years. But the ignorance has added this nonsense lie that believes 1,000,000,000% that there is an inherent I. And that's the problem. The belief in the lie, not just not knowing the truth. Can you hear the point? That's why it's so painful. And we are grasping at those lies for eons, Buddha says. So much so that even the lies have created our own realities, So it's an enormous thing to unpack. An incredible edifice that we have created over eons, Buddha says. So this ignorance is profoundly, primordially, instinctively deep. Okay, that's the root delusion. And as long as we've got that, we are in samsara. From the first second of your direct, non-conceptual insight into the absence of that fantasy I is the first second of you climbing out of samsara into nirvana. You're not there yet, but you can't fall back after that. That's when your first moment of realising emptiness is how they say it. We'll get there. So, primordially, this ego grasping believes in an inherent me, which sounds so abstract to us. Whoever thought you were inherent? You think, what a ridiculous idea. Who says that, Because it's so primordial, we don't notice we do it. So we'll go into this later. So, on the basis of that primordial ego grasping, on the basis of that lie, the root, one of the consequences experientially of that ego grasping, and this sounds so abstract to us as well, is that it literally has created a sense of a separate I. Now this sounds so weird because as far as we're concerned, the universe consists of lots of separate I's, and we can't conceive of any alternative. It sounds so bizarre to us, So this sense of a separate I is frantic, fear-based, miserable, pathetic, self-pity me, as Lama Yeshe calls it. Not happy at all. Depressed, bereft. So its main voice, the outcropping of that ego grasping, the main voice of ego is then this simple word, attachment. So it is multifaceted, many levels, so complex. Lama Yeshe says, I can tell you about attachment for one whole year. You will never begin to comprehend until we start to go deep inside. And that's the point. To go deep inside, to unpack it, you have to first interpret what it is and have the right terms, the right label, the right definition. So, attachment, like I said, is multifaceted. The first, the most energetic level of attachment, which is the habit of having practiced it in countless lives, is that we get born with this deep, depending on the person, deep, unbearable feeling of dissatisfaction. Instinctive. I am never enough. No matter what I get, not enough. What I do, not enough. What I achieve, never enough. What I have, how much he tells me he loves me, it's never enough. It's like this bottomless pit of dissatisfaction. And it's a default assumption. We never question it. This is beyond heartbreaking. That's the deepest level of attachment. It's beyond words from practice. Then naturally, because you feel dissatisfied and separate, that's why all the world is out there, isn't it? So naturally we're looking, searching. This attachment is searching hungrily for something out there. One of the objects of our senses, first level. Desperate. Depending on your karma, it'll be to have sex, to eat things, to kill, to lie, to steal, to torture, to do whatever. It's because of attachment. And that we believe doing that, having that, being that, will fill up the gaping hole. So attachment then, the next level of attachment is to manipulate, to get that thing, to do that thing. And the story of it's very strong in your mind. You don't question that story. No one says, why am I attached to food as opposed to, as opposed to gardening? You just, I like food, That's a habit. Attachment. Oh, and so then the next level, this is the over-exaggerating part. Then you're searching for that object, believing that when you get it, it'll fill up the gaping hole. So of course, one is thinking about it all the time, trying to find it, looking for it, and I get it. Let's say it's boys. And then my eyes land on this object, the shape and colour. Karma also is involved here, strong karma between us, let's say. And then something, the karma ripens, and attachment goes berserk. and then makes him look like heaven on earth and God all in one, you know. Isn't it? So, in other words, that's exaggerating. And then, of course, the frantic manipulating to get him. In this case, you've got to get him, you know. So all the dramas and stories in the head. You can't stop thinking. One of the signs of attachment is you can't stop thinking about the object. Well, look at our lives. They're very hilarious, you know. I mean, that's why you have such compassion. When you have compassion, when you say karma. For people, like a friend of mine on death row in Kentucky, my friend Mitch, who's a Buddhist, he said, this guy, he said, Robina, he thinks of torture all the time. Well, we think of food all the time. Aren't we lucky? Can you imagine being born with a tendency to torture people? I mean, talk about compassion. When you know this for yourself, this is the wisdom when you know your own ridiculous habits, you can have compassion for other people. Sure, lock him up. Please stop Hitler if you can. Do you understand? So look at our own attachment. One of the signs of attachment is you can't stop thinking. It's obsessive. So we call that compulsive obsessive, whatever we call it, you know. We've all got it. It's called attachment, okay? So then, of course, thinking about it all the time, you're imagining it. I'm thinking about him, imagining it. And when the attachment's really strong, you've got to be next to the object. You've got to consume the object, eat it, touch it, taste it, smell it, eat it. Isn't it? Isn't it? Isn't it? So grotesquely exaggerating the object's divineness and the object's function in bringing you happiness. So this is still so nuanced, because the fact is, contact with the cake does trigger pleasure. You can't say it's not pleasure. So it's not wrong to say the cake causes happiness in a simple sense. But Buddha says it's more nuanced than that. But anyway, it's really obvious, but we don't like to think this. The second kind of suffering, when we look at the Four Noble Truths, there's 3 levels of suffering. The second one is called the suffering of change. The first one is when Shuki leaves me. That's the pain of the suffering of the horrible things happening. But when I'm in love with Shuki, which looks like happiness, that's what he calls the suffering of change, which is very depressing because we think it's called happiness. Buddha says, sorry guys, you're on the way to suffering. So with the chocolate cake, it's more simple. We believe that when I get that cake, I'll get happy. The anticipation is incredible, isn't it? The cake looks unbelievably delicious. And we know that deliciousness, we don't think it's an opinion in our mind. That sounds hilarious, doesn't it? When the attachment's very strong, it seems hilarious to think that my mind has made up a story that makes the cake look delicious. The energy is so strong, the cake's like vibrating deliciousness, like it's begging you to eat it, isn't it? This is why we can't resist it, isn't it? Do you understand? When you're in love with the person, you can't resist. You've got to touch, smell, taste, eat, whatever. You can't get enough. That's attachment energy. And that is the only way in our life, having a body of the senses, to trigger any pleasure. And there's so many, I mean, we've got to analyse those words. Each of these words has a particular definition and a particular function, and we have to understand them. Whether it's lunchtime yet or not, I don't know. Lunchtime, we can do that. Okay, we can do it. All right. So attachment is a specific delusion, neurotic, frantic, fear-based, I-based, and a more brutal way to put it. This is the trouble. Okay, now, in my relationship with Shuki, let's say, I also happen to have love, which is virtuous, which is marvellous. It's altruistic, wants him to be happy. It's genuine, I love him. I really want him to be happy, there's no question. I have compassion for him. I wish he didn't suffer. I try to help him. I have generosity. I have forgiveness. I have patience. We all have this. These are our saving grace. Now, think of this. If I couldn't access much of my love and patience and generosity and compassion, I'd be a vampire. I'd be a monster, wouldn't I? Think about it. If you're look at the world. If I'm mainly attachment, I'd manipulate, I'd get him, and I'd spit him out like bones the next day, you know. Or get angry or kill him. That's if you have raw attachment. So we've all got attachment, but our saving grace is the virtues and the goodness. But we can't tell the difference. That's the tragedy. That's the trick. That's the hard part, you know. It's like weeds and herbs look the same in your garden if you don't know botany. That's why the revelation is when you learn botany, you go, oh wow, I couldn't believe it. Now I can see the difference. Same here. Using Buddha's view of the mind, when you learn it, now you have a basis for interpreting. You go, oh my God, I could never tell the difference before. I thought love was attachment. Now I know they're completely different. But you won't know that until you have the definition. And we're talking Buddha's definition here, not Jung's, not Freud's. This is really specific. It takes time. So the good stuff is marvellous. So if any relationship does work, it's because you've got the good stuff. But if it's mainly delusions, I'm sorry, it'll be a disastrous relationship. It's just obvious. You'll kill each other or yourself, you know. But it's a minefield, because we have all these different definitions in our culture. I mean, what I'm describing here, we would just call normal. We would just call normal. But what it says is a terrible mental illness. It's just terrible suffering. But we have to learn to identify it. It's so intricate, you know. So attachment, dissatisfaction, hunger, it's like an emotional hunger to get something, believing when I get it, I'll get happy, it'll fill up the gaping hole. Then it exaggerates the deliciousness, exaggerates the role, his role. Therefore it brings in my happiness, then it brings masses of expectation. I expect, my attachment expects like a vampire, that he had better do every damn thing that my attachment wants. We understand this. The more I'm hungry, the more I'm needy, the more miserable I am, the more empty I am, and the more I dump all the responsibility on him to make me happy. This is called samsara, people. That I'll manipulate to get him to do all the nice things. And of course, now let's look at the next delusion that comes on this hierarchy. Ego grasping gives rise to attachment, and this runs the show all day. It's not as if you have attachment to sometimes. It's at a very subtle level. It's basically, putting it in a very brutal way, this attachment is this frantic, desperate craving to get what I, the supposed I, wants every millisecond. It's desperate, it's frantic. Another way to say that, attachment's job is to find the objects that will trigger happy feelings in me. So attachment, his job is to get good feelings. That's it, that's his job. So we'll go into the word feelings. It's really profound how they talk about that in Buddhist psychology. It's very fascinating. We'll do that in a second. So this runs the show. It's behind everything we decide, everything we do. So for us, as far as we're concerned, if contact with something triggers a pleasant feeling, we naturally think it must be good. So if it's cake, then no one complains too much, because you're always going to get arrested for eating chocolate cake. But what if you're attached to torturing your poodle? Because we don't understand that in our culture, so we think he's evil, put him in prison. But you torture fish every day, but because that's culture, we don't mind, you know. It's the same thing. Fish suffer terribly. Because it's culture, we don't eat poodles, you know, they do in the Philippines. We eat fish, so we all call it good. We don't know this, you know. So, okay, so attachment's job, its function, is to get objects, people, cakes, actions like fishing, if that's your tendency, torturing, if you like your poor guy on death row, whatever it might be, play music, whatever. It can be it can be a benign thing, it can be quite even a virtuous thing. How marvellous. Until you hardly realise you've got an attachment for it. So that's why at least, if you're going to have attachment, be attached to something useful. It's progression, you know. Some people have attachment to torture and killing. Some people have attachment to playing the piano. So they can be relatively benign, they can be very heavy, very virtuous, very unhappy. Whatever. Attachment is still attachment is attachment. In its nature, it's a poison, but it's still relative, whether it's that bad or not, in terms of the objects. We understand that. But attachment is this deluded, neurotic, coming from an emotional hunger, which is attachment, but thinks I'm not enough, so I'm going to get that. And then the expectation is when I get it, I'll get happy. And Buddha says that's a rotten lie. And we have to look at, that's hard to see. We'll go into that in a minute. So attachment's job is to get the objects that will trigger pleasant feelings in me. Why? Because pleasant feeling is another word for happiness. And we spend our day. So you sit a certain way, you get a pain, you shift, because you want a pleasant feeling. Nobody questions that. It's based on attachment. This can be reasonable too. You want food, you get food. You're hungry, you get food. Attached to this, you get that. Attached to killing, you've got to keep killing. Attached to lying, keep lying. Attached to torture, you've got to find someone to torture. Whatever it might be, you know, due to past karma. And it's constant, and it's unceasing, and you never stop thinking about it. You're attached to jumping on little girls, you keep going to get little girls. And there's a drag because you've got to hide and do it. No one accepts jumping on little girls, you know. Attachment nonsense, like a nightmare. It's a horror show in the mind. But the irony of having a lot of virtue is you can't see it. You know? It's interesting. So now, next one. What happens when attachment doesn't get what it wants? or gets what it doesn't want. And it's 1,000 times a day, I tell you. That's called aversion. Bare bones, simple state of mind, aversion. So the fundamental two delusions are attachment and aversion. The root one is ego grasping. Attachment is the hunger and the craving to get the nice thing, and aversion is the horror when you don't get it. Get my point? So attachment is very simple. You see the object that you've got karma with, oh, that's nice, and you go towards it. Aversion is, oh, no, that's ugly, and you go away from it. Now, there are a whole spectrum of aversion. The violent expression of aversion is called anger. A person's got very strong aversion, and their habit is to be angry quickly. That's called anger. That's clear. You have mild versions of it, and this is every day. Annoyed, irritated, upset, frustrated. We use those words constantly. No one ever thinks that's a problem. But they're attachment, just not getting what it wants. And because your mind, because everything you ever do and say and think and see and feel and touch and taste and smell is programmed inside you, none of this stuff goes astray. But we don't deal with it when it happens. So you broke the cup when you're doing the dishes, you get annoyed. You know, the thing doesn't work, the person doesn't answer the phone, you get upset. The car comes in front of you, you get angry. We never deal with it, so it builds up, builds up, builds up, until what? You kill somebody. You have a depression, you can't cope with life. Because we don't deal with these things as they happen. Are you hearing me? That's aversion. So you don't go to your therapist, oh, I got annoyed when I broke a cup. Oh, shut up, Robina, go home. But that's when you should start looking. But we wait till you want to kill your husband before you go to the therapist. That's when the wheels are falling off. So you know with your car, you see a little shake happens, which is like getting annoyed when you break a cup. You don't dismiss it. You pay attention to it. And you fix it. Do you see my point? Do you hear that point? But we wait till you want to kill your husband or yourself before you think you've got a problem. Because we don't pay attention to these ordinary daily delusions and unhappy and anxieties and worries. We just think they're boring, you know. Because they're all symptoms of attachment and aversion. So dealing with them when they happen, you'll never have a mental breakdown. At the end of a day, you'll wake up the next day brilliant, and you keep getting better and better and better at it. It's not rocket science. It demands attention, it demands humility, it demands owning this as yours without guilt and shame, and a delight in wanting to uncover more of these ridiculous delusions. There's many, many, many. I'm just talking simple level, you know. So anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. Or gets what it doesn't want. This is called samsara. And so we can see on the planet when terrible things happen. Like your baby is destroyed. You know, I just read recently, in the New York Times, they sometimes, I read all these papers, you know, and they have always this, they feature different types of stories and needy cases and different things. And one type of thing, like unsolved crimes. This is one story. There's one woman from the south, she happened to be black, came up from the south with a new 3-month-old baby, and she was in the Greyhound station, and some woman comes up to a young woman and holds the baby, and then eventually says she'll go change the nappy of the baby, and then the baby never comes back. So 33 years later, this mother, broken hearted, I mean, just a simple story, okay? But for 33 years, the agony and pain and grief and loss and blame and guilt, and that's attachment and aversion. So you could argue if she were a bodhisattva, and this is where it just seems sort of cruel in a way, because we just think this is so normal. Well, Buddha says it is normal, but it's suffering, and we can go beyond it. So if that was a bodhisattva, they'd have a completely different approach to it, like we're talking here, you know? Because they've dealt with their mind, they understand the reason, they know why it's happening, and they'd be able to go beyond the pain and let go of it and accept blah, 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 you know? Not becoming cruel. We think it's almost virtuous to hold on to pain. It shows you how sensitive you are. It's not. It's pain. It's suffering. So this kind woman, you can see in her photo, you know, the pain and grief, but mostly guilt, never stopping, endlessly thinking, if only I'd done this, and why did I do this, and why, the terrible pain and grief, and so that's attachment and aversion, and do you understand? Ordinary things. The pain is unbearable. Not to blame, to have compassion. People who go mad when really bad things happen. Because literally, the attachment is so strong, it's natural in all of us, you simply can't bear the intensity of the pain. So many people's way attachment functions, if you're not an angry type person, it would go completely internal, and you live in complete denial This is a common way that suffering happens. Since childhood, bad things happen. We've all got attachment, okay? And we all have aversion. But some people get angry, which almost is not healthy, but in a sense has got some health in it if you can express. Not before you kill somebody, I mean. But at least, whereas the other one, you only notice 60 years later and it comes up, you know. Because nothing can go astray, nothing can get buried, nothing can get hidden. We want it to go away, we wish it would go away. It cannot go away. It's all in the mind. So we might as well learn to deal with it, you know, and then be happy to uncover it. And this is all the way to enlightenment, where we can uncover countless past lives of stuff and deal with it, you know. Are we communicating here? So attachment and aversion sound such cute words, you can't believe it, you know. But the Buddhist view, they're profound the levels that they go to. So ignorance, attachment, aversion. These three alone, you'll have incredible understanding of your own mind, you know. And then on the basis of that, you have jealousy and all the other silly old things, you know. Do you understand? This is the hierarchy of samsara. These are the neuroses. And luckily we have love, compassion, kindness, that are our saving grace. These are why we have any happiness at all, any virtue at all, any kindness, any good things happening, from past karma as well as now. So we have to be able to go into our garden internally and distinguish between these herbs and weeds using this model, if we choose to. You don't have to. You can use Jung if you like. Are we communicating? And so the key function of these neuroses, and these are just the psychological, these are just the emotional ones. There are many of these so-called wrong views. Buddha says they're wrong views, they're incorrect opinions. Not in a judgmental way. They're not a valid assessment of the object. There's lies in there. So there's the other whole set, of course, from the Buddha's philosophical point of view. Remember, Buddha's philosophical point of view is coming from his own experience, it's still about reality. Are the way things exist. For example, we believe our mother made us. We believe our mind is the brain. I believe God created me. I'm not being critical here, I'm just pointing things out. We all have a philosophy of the universe. Many people who are materialists say, oh, I don't believe in anything. The assumption is that religion has made up stories and science is truth, isn't it? It's such an arrogant view. It's such hubris. I like to think that the whole world, over centuries and centuries of human endeavour, amazing human beings, we've come up with so many ways of seeing the world. How about having respect for all of them? Some might be rubbish, I'll agree with you. But give them equal status. So there's scientific view, there's communism, there's Jewish, there's 47 varieties of it, we all know that. Buddhism the same. Islam, the Australian Aborigines, the Indian Americans, there's countless humans with different viewpoints about the universe. Well, at least see them all as equal. They're at least viewpoints coming up from humans. And I think many have many similar experiences, many similar findings. How marvellous. But from the Buddhist point of view, it's up to us to engage, to find out, whatever. You know, we're the boss here. We're the boss to find out what is real. And Buddha's view is it's not a question of believing it's right. It's a question of finding what is truth. And Buddha says you can find that. That's how it makes us nervous a bit, like it's like dogmatism, it's like being dogma. It's not. It's either true or it's not. Karma is either real, true or it's not. And we have to find out. That's the Buddha's point, and we can. He says he did, so it's up to us to follow his steps if we wish. So we have the wrong view, he says, that someone made me. We have the wrong view that mummy made me. We have the wrong view that my mind is my brain. He'll call those wrong views, but he's not being fundamentalist. He's not saying you go to hell for it. He's not saying, you must believe me. It's like saying 1 + 1 is 3. It's just not true. It's like that's the approach Buddha has. Do you understand my point? So it's up to us to find out. And I mean, all I can say is, like I said, for me, I've chosen to use Buddha's worldview as my working hypothesis until I find it to be wrong. Well, I'm enjoying my time with Buddha, So far, so good is all I can say. I'm content with that. Are we communicating here? Any questions? People? Huh? No? Yes, sweetheart. Talk to me.
So, the first part you expounded a way to deal actually with our
Mind.
With our mind.
Beginning to look at that. Yes.
Yeah, beginning to look at that.
That's right.
Like concentrating, see the delusions.
That's right. Based on understanding Buddha's model, studying Buddha's botany. Yep. Then?
And then we'll get quite good at it to, to sit down, to concentrate and to see the delusions coming and going and to differentiate between them.
That's right.
And then you said that the root problem is the self-grasping.
That's right.
However, this self is the one who is having all these delusions.
That's right.
So that's the major delusion.
That's right. Believing, okay, so keep going, what's the question?
So the question is, it's like the more we deal with the delusions, the more we strengthen the major delusion.
No,
It's like we are
I understand.
looking at that.
I understand.
We are looking at the top of the tree
I understand.
instead of going to the roots.
Well, okay, so the question is, then the question from
The
this
question is, how do you go down to the roots and cut off the roots?
by working with the branches first.
Working with the brain.
You've got to work with the branches first, it's obvious. So, okay, but that's the first point. By looking into the delusions, you are not increasing the self. So let's have a look at this. This gets us to the ultimate wisdom, which is finally where all these teachings are leading to. So this is the ultimate in the wisdom teachings of the Buddha, his observation about how things exist ultimately. So let's look at that briefly now. We'll go into this in more detail later. In the context of what they call the two truths, okay? So Buddha says, the universe consists of billions and trillions of different individual things, and that's called conventional reality. What's your name?
Shlomo.
Shlomo. There's a person sitting on that cushion, and you're not a toilet, you're not a cushion, right? We know that your label is a person, isn't it? So we're each individual examples of a phenomenon called a person. Will we accept this? We're not examples of cushions, are we? There's a cushion. So these are all conventional phenomena, and we can see every day we're creating new phenomena. I mean, before Mr. Steve Jobs came along, who'd heard of an iPad, you know? Look at the universe now, some things as a result of an iPad. So the universe consists of trillions of individual, conventional things. It's the terms they use. So one of those is a cushion, one's a toilet, one's an iPad, and one's a person. Now the word person, self, I, me, synonymous. So we get thrown by hearing that Buddha says there is no self. Because that's coming from the Hindus, which say, Atman, there is a self. So, but the meaning of self is quite much more nuanced than merely there is no self. So, conventionally, Shlomo is an example of a person, an I, a me, a being, a person. So you are a person. Now, the tricky part is this. A cushion is a cushion. A hand is a hand. A bottle is a bottle. But the tricky part is, conventionally, the Buddha says, there are all these countless trillions of individual conventional phenomena that do exist conventionally in dependence upon various factors. Causes, they exist in dependence upon their parts, they exist finally in dependence upon minds calling them that. These are the three levels of dependent arising. So the shorthand for conventional reality is the term dependent arising or interdependence. That everything conventionally that does exist exists interdependently, dependent upon this, dependent upon that. Then this leads us to recognize that ultimately every one of those individual phenomena does not have an intrinsic, inherent nature of person, cushion, or anything else. So the tricky part is to put together what seems to us initially as two complete contradictions. So putting it really simply, okay, emptiness is the shorthand for how things exist ultimately, or how things don't exist. Dependent arising is the shorthand for how things exist conventionally. So right now, Buddha says, in our mind, we have two completely extreme views. We don't have the right views at all. So when we hear that Buddha says, as Ramazopa puts it, from the side of the cup, the person, there is not one atom of anything there that makes it that. So as soon as we hear that, we'll go, oh, well, there's no cup, there's no person. We can't help but throw the baby out with the bathwater and become nihilistic. And this is a typical and completely instinctive and natural response because we have this ignorance. So that's how we hear it. So then as soon as we hear, oh, ha, there is a cup after all, oh, thank God, grasp. That's the other extreme. So this one over-exaggerates the cupness, and this one under-exaggerates the cupness, and we can't get the two together, so we go crazy. So the job is, right now we've got the two extreme views. Emptiness means nihilism, dependent arising means permanent, there is something. So with all the analysing and analysing, this to get us to hear, when we hear emptiness, we go, ha, Robina, that means there is a dependent arising cup. And every time you think, oh, thank God there is a cup, you go, ha, no, dependent arising cup means there is no inherent cup. So in the beginning it's like squeezing your brain because we hear them as opposite. So that's what we're going to look into more deeply. What does it mean dependent arising? What does it mean emptiness? So there is a self, but not an inherent self. There is a cup, but not an inherent cup. But because we've never thought like this, we can't hear the difference. And that's the job we have to learn to do. It's very subtle, very nuanced. So conventionally, Shlomo does exist. But what we think Shlomo is an exaggeration, a distortion. You know, it's not accurate. As Lama Zopa says, when we've realised the emptiness of Shlomo, okay, let's use you as an example. When you realise the emptiness of Shlomo, it's as if there's no self. But there is, conventionally. But what does exist is so subtle. It's as if there's no Shlomo. It's as if he's an illusion. And this is tasty. This is words from the yogi who's experienced it, but this is very meaningful. So these are the two truths. And once, Tsongkhapa says, once we understand reality in relation to the two truths, we'll never lose the plot. One of the biggest mistakes is to fall into nihilism. It's the worst. And the other one, which is actually not as bad, and that's expressed by the eternalistic religions, that there is a creator, there is a self. And that's better than nothing, but the Buddha would say that's a mistake too. So it's really subtle to get these two truths together. And the middle way is when these two come together. So this is the words for it. But I'll go into more detail.
So actually, this is just an upeka.
Right?
So the way to start meditating and analyzing, etc., is just skillful means.
Well, of course it is, but
we-
it's also, it's not tricky though, it's also just reality. You know, you can't get, all these things we've been saying so far are about wisdom, how things exist and how they don't. So when we understand in these earlier stages about how these delusions exaggerate and distort, in the Buddhist model, you don't really learn, mainly when you talk about the mind, which is in the wisdom wing, which is more like high school or the second scope of the Lam Rim. They don't talk much about the delusional aspect. They mainly talk about the affliction, the disturbingness. But what I think is really powerful to try and understand how all the afflictions, the disturbings, the anger and the attachment are not only disturbing, but they're liars. You only really learn about that when you learn about emptiness, but I think it's good to learn it first. Because ego grasping, attachment, anger, pride, all of them have the one characteristic of being liars, of misconceptions. But they've just got different flavour of misconceptions. And ego grasping is the root, most subtle misconception. So you can't get to the root until you've weakened the branches. It's not possible. Impossible. 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 It's not as if it's just cheating to really not real work. It's part of getting to this one. You can't do this one until you've done... First you... Okay. First of all, you know the Lam Rim package? The Lam Rim, the Tibetan, the Gelugpas call it that. It's just this packaging that Tsongkhapa put together of all the Buddhist teachings from A to Z. That's all it is. So, as we know, respecting the lineage, and all the lamas will speak very respectfully and use the words they learned from their teachers. So as Lama Zopa, when he talks about the first stages of practice, which we know briefly as the lowest scope, he would say, it is the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the least capability. That's a correct phrase, you know. But I mean, that's bizarre to us, right? What are you talking about, you know? Well, I'd rather call junior school. I'll say junior school. I like that, you know. We go, oh yeah, I get it. Next one, middle scope. High school. This is the wisdom wing. So the essence of junior school is karma. The essence of it is abiding by the laws of karma. Now, understanding cause and effect is the first level of dependent arising. So understanding that you are not this innocent victim who didn't get asked to get born, who bad things happen to unfairly, which is the victim, which is not understanding emptiness, by thinking about how you created the causes, the conventional you created the causes, you're experiencing the fruits of your own actions, cause and effect, then it brings an incredible sense of grown-upness, and you stop becoming a victim, you stop blaming other people. It loosens ego grasping at a grosser level. It's profound. You can't get to emptiness until you have that. Then you go to high school, and now you be your own therapist, and now we start to look into the mind itself, and now we start to look into the characteristics of the mind, how they're misconceptions. That prepares you for realising emptiness. So karma and the mind, the wisdom wing, leads you to get to the root. They're preparing your mind. I mean, obviously, if you go to, that's university, compassion wing is university, and wisdom is taught there. You know very well if you go to university music, you've got to have done junior school and high school first. It's logical. You can't leap, you know. If you're very smart, you go through them quickly. But you've got to go through the literal mental stages. And they prepare you. They can't be just like skillful means. No, wrong. That's superstitious. They really got to do it to prepare you to get to the deepest one. Do you see?
Yeah.
Good. I think we'd have lunch now. Come on.
Yeah.
Yes? At 55.
We need a topic for the group discussion.
No, you don't. You should do. But what that means is, I want you, and it's not group up, we're all going to hang around here or something will go, whatever you do, I don't care. Go out if you like, I don't mind. But if you do, I'd like you, there's two options. I'm not a policeman, I might sound like, but I'm not going to police you, I promise. You've got two options. One, sit with a little group, 2, 3, 4, and take any one of the points. We've talked a bit about karma, I hardly got into detail. We've talked about the mind. So maybe about the mind, distinguishing a delusion from a virtue, thinking about how it's beginningless, but all these things we discussed before. I didn't say beginningless, but yeah. So take even a small topic and then go into it carefully. And then don't just blast your opinion to each other. Listen, go into it, think it through. It's really excellent. It can be interesting. So that's one option. The other option is silence. But if you go out for lunch, I can't stop you from doing anything. So if you want to stick there and process and write your journal, go ahead. And have fun and be reasonable to each other, for God's sake. But it'd be really good if you have a bit of discussion. Well, how long for lunch?
1 hour.
We have 1 hour for lunch,
And then?
then an hour and a half for discussion.
Oh, ridiculous. Oh, come on, an hour and a half total for everything. Plenty. Even sooner than that. Then come back. I mean, let's just make the most of our time. Is that okay? Yeah, plenty. Fantastic. Okay. Just eat your lunch and talk at the same time, or eat your lunch and have a bit of talk after. But then relax, just do what you like. I'm suggesting. Do you understand? Have a happy time. But let's think of our lunch differently. All Buddha's doing is wanting us to see everything differently. Let's see lunch in a different way. Okay. So right now, lunch is seen through the lens of attachment, obviously. I mean, you didn't bring a place of shit to eat, did you? You bring what you think you like, which is what we're attached to. That's reasonable. But let's see it in terms of emptiness. First of all, let's think, there's no real olives, real cheese, real hummus, real whatever there. It's a label we give to this thing that we have gotten used to, that we're familiar with, that we're attached to, and we like, so we label it that, and we think the hummus is coming from the hummus. It's not. The olives are coming from the olives. They're not. They've got no inherent nature. So let's just imagine it all dissolves into empty space. And then imagine it manifests in a big container in the sky. And we then imagine the energy of the body, speech and mind of all the Buddhas, Om Ahom, melts into it. It makes it such delicious nectar. Just use your creative imagination. All this delicious nectar. No inherent nature. And now think, as long as Opa says the main thing is to think of offering it. And just thinking it is powerful. So just imagine all the holy beings and all the suffering sentient beings. And if you could, you would happily offer this delicious nectar to them. And then imagine them all, next point, Lama Zopa says this is the very meaning in Tantra of the word to offer, or the word in Tibetan chur, or the word in Sanskrit puja, or the word in Hebrew, what is it, offer? Oh, you can say it, I couldn't hear it properly. Sorry, that's that word. The meaning in Tantra of that word is, the essence of the word is to imagine the recipients experiencing the joy of receiving this delicious nectar which we so happily offer. Lama Sangye Lama Che, Dejin Lama Gedunte, Kungi Debo Lama Te, Lama Namla Che Pambu. And then as Lama Zopa said one time in Melbourne, once we've done that, the bigger our stomach, the better. Okay, so please enjoy your lunch.
So we have an hour and
Hour and a bit, see how it goes.